Have you tried a low-carb diet like a carnivore diet or a keto diet and seen your LDL skyrocket while on that diet? Did your doctor chastise you and tell you, see, carnivore diets all cause high cholesterol and tell you to get off? Did you ask your doctor, well, how come this doesn't happen to everyone on a carnivore diet? If so, their head probably exploded. And there is this debate as to whether carnivore diets, keto diets, or other low-carb diets cause high cholesterol. And that debate there's good points on both sides. But now we have new data from a reanalysis of the Diet Fits trial by the Stanford School of Medicine that helps explain why we see different results in different people. These researchers took 431 participants from the Diet Fits trial, and they reanalyzed the data, and they used those 431 of the 600 plus that were in the trial because those 431 had genetic data available. So these results were presented recently at American Society of Nutrition conference, and it is a pre-publication abstract. So this hasn't been peer-reviewed yet, but it's very interesting, and I can't wait to see the peer review. But what the Stanford School of Medicine researchers found was, or first what they did was they took the participants that had genetic data and they put them on a low-carb diet, and they compared genetics, saturated fat intake, and diet type. So genetics, saturated fat intake, and low carb diet, and they wanted to see what happens to LDL numbers in those participants. Who has high LDL on the low carb diet, and does that correlate with genetics? In order to determine the genetics and does it contribute, they did something else novel. Past studies have used only 2 genes to lean on when doing this analysis. The Stanford authors used hundreds of genes to create a single polygenic score that would determine your tendency or the tendency of the study participants towards high LDL genetically. So that score was great, and I look forward to hopefully that being available clinically someday. Why? Well, because that score showed us who the hyper responders were to the low carb diet. And what they found was the people on the low carb diet who developed high LDL were the ones who had the genetic predisposition for saturated fat sensitivity. And so this helps clarify it's not low carb diets are all bad, carnivore's bad, keto's bad. It's what I always say. It should be individualized and specific. Is the diet right for you? We can't judge that by the average of the population who eats the diet. We have to judge it on an individual to individual basis. And the only way to know if a carnivore diet is good or bad for you and your cholesterol levels is to test and not guess. So if you're going to move to a carnivore diet or a keto diet or some other form of low carb diet and you're concerned about what your cholesterol does on that diet, you should get a pre-cholesterol testing. Okay, so in a standard doctor's office, that would be a standard lipid panel. I would suggest getting a more thorough cholesterol panel, and I'm creating one that will be available soon when my book is available, called the Beyond Cholesterol Panel. And that will take us beyond just the standard lipid panel and look at genetic risk for high cholesterol, look at inflammatory markers and other metabolic markers, tracking insulin sensitivity, etc. But at the very least, you want to have a lipid panel at the beginning before you start the diet, then incorporate the diet, and then do follow-up lipid testing to see, on an individualized basis for you, what does your LDL do on that diet. If your LDL skyrockets, then perhaps you have a genetic predisposition to saturated fat sensitivity, and then you could tweak the saturated fat that's in the diet and the sources of the saturated fat in the diet and see, does that change your LDL? If your LDL is still high with that and you're concerned, again, that's where the Beyond Cholesterol testing helps, because remember that cholesterol is more than just LDL. It's particle sizes, it's inflammation, it's genetic risk. So having those other tests help you know if all the other things are good and just LDL goes up, but the LDL particle sizes are large buoyant ones instead of small dense, you're actually not at increased cardiovascular risk. So testing and not guessing is the key to individualized answers and to determining if a specific diet is right for your physiology. So that's today's nugget. Again, it's pre-publication data, but it's very exciting, and it supports what I teach all the time, is that things are individual. A diet itself is not good or bad for everyone. I wrote about that in my first book called The Autoimmune Answer. Chapter 9 is called There Is No Perfect Diet. Okay, that still holds true here over a half decade later, that it's individualized. If you want to know what's right for you, you have to do testing so that we have you at baseline, incorporate the change, and then retest to observe what did that change do to your physiology.